Hello everyone, welcome at the launch of our HLB Survey of Business Leaders 2025, Powering Up Your Profitability. Welcome to all of you here in the room, as well as the people joining us live on the live stream. My name is Lesley Hornung. I'm the CMO for HLB and the program lead for the HLB Survey of Business Leaders. And I am welcomed tonight by a great panel to help me reveal the findings of our report. So let me just introduce our panelists. I've got with me Toon, Technology Strategies Lead at HLB member firm Beaver & Struthers. I have Oana-Maria from Hype Innovation. Of course, our CEO, Donzelli, and Tracy, Vegro, CEO of the Securities and Investment Chartered Institute. Thank you so much for being with us and taking the time. So before we dive in our findings, let me just briefly give an overview of our sample this year. We surveyed nearly 1,200, or a bit over actually, 1,200 senior executives this year from across 55 countries over the period of late September to about mid-November. We have a good representation from different regions, as well as about 20 different sectors represented in our survey. And people coming, or respondents coming from a variety of backgrounds in terms of company sizes and structures. So with that, let me dive into our findings because we have a lot to cover tonight. Let's start with business leaders' their confidence. What we found in our survey this year is that levels of confidence have actually bounced back to pre-pandemic times. But at the same time, there is also a good level of caution. So those that are saying they believe the rate of global will increase this year is 46%. And those that feel confident about their own abilities to grow the business this year is 85%. But at the same time, when we look at our risk radar questions, we also see that the cumulative risks have increased. They have been increasing steadily year on year. And compared to 2020, they're actually 12 percentage points higher at an average at 58%. So what are the things that business leaders are most concerned about? Economic uncertainty is topping the risk radar, followed by cybersecurity and geopolitics. So what we're seeing is a bit of a trend towards the more existential risk, if you will, those that business leaders have less control over. And the things that they have a bit more control over, things like access to talent or consumer behavior, are risks that are actually a bit lower this year. So with that, I think I'm going to go to the panel for my first question. And I would like to start with you, Marco. Considering the risk radar and the heightened levels of risk, what do you think is driving high levels of confidence and optimism?
Thank you, Lesley. So I gather that, yes, in one sense, we are going back pre-pandemic in terms of confidence. On the other side, a lot of things happened from 2020 till now. And I think people are just more prepared. So there are stormy clouds around. It's just that we know that they are there. More specifically, there is what we see adaptive resilience on one side, and on the other, something that is connected, like being more prepared to risk. So there is risk management, evolution, and preparation. So there are systems in place that, make you say, we know it's not an easy time. It's volatile, many things can happen, but hey, we built all so much from 2020 onward that we know what to do from here. And the other thing is that there are also like new things happening, such as like there could be, I read today that the Central European Bank cut a little bit the interest rates. So there will be a trend of that. We all know, how Trump, cares about this point. So definitely going forward, hopefully inflation will keep lowering, and interest rates as well. So that will be positive for the business in general.
Mm-hmm. You briefly mentioned Trump. Our data was collected during the time of the US elections. And we saw not a large or significant amount, but a slight decrease in confidence after the US elections. What do you think the impact of his presidency will be on international business?
There are lots of points. So, of course, like tariffs, taxes, maybe some impact on ESG, on other things, geopolitical issues, or like solutions we don't know yet. The only thing that I can say is that this is the second time Trump is there. So there is in the first round, again there wasn't so much preparation. So there was a lot of okay, what's going to happen now? Maybe this is still the case, but there is a little bit more awareness, I would say. And in general, there were, I think, 88 elections in 2024.
Yes.
So 2024 was really, I would say, volatile as a year. It could go, many different directions. 2025, nevertheless, we see more clarity. Whichever you want to look at it, there is more clarity. And I think that is important in general for confidence and for business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anyone would like to add to that?
Well, I suppose what I'd say is I completely agree. And what you never know in politics is how quickly it can change. So as we've also seen in the UK, a government that's had a seemingly massive majority doesn't necessarily get good coverage or good buy-in to what they're trying to do. So probably puts more of an emphasis on business to be ready with its case, ready with data like this to show what is actually going to drive things like growth. They're not abstracts really, because growth in the economy is based on companies investing in talent and change, different operating models and all of that. So I thought this report was really timely for all sorts of reasons in just about every place in the world. And so I applauded the internationalism of it all. And I'm also guessing that nobody thinks there's an easy answer anymore. That's the other big truism I've taken from being in government myself as a civil servant, then as a regulator, and now in a chartered body in the city where investment is all my members do. It's crucial that sentiment is good and that data and risks and things like that are collaboratively shared, because it's either a global interest or a national interest or even a company interest. All of that is what makes growth in an economy. So very timely, and I agree with all of what Marco said.
Excellent, thank you. So let's have a look at the themes that emerged in our data this year. To start with, we definitely see an internal focus from business leaders. When asked the question what areas they're looking to strengthen, 65% is prioritizing their operational efficiency, followed by investment in technology as well as people. And when we think about growth, actually only 16% is looking at market expansion as a mean to grow. So yeah, this suggests that they're really looking to strengthen their core in order to raise profit and growth this year. A second theme that emerged was around people-centric transformation. So what we found is that learning and development is at top of the agenda with 55%, as well as culture and people to enable transformation and change. The third area that we saw emerge is around innovation, technology, and of course the use of AI. So here we actually found that when asked what the areas of weakness are, innovation is actually in the top 5 of areas that business leaders consider a weakness that they need to address this year. And when it comes to business leaders, their attitude towards AI, we actually see that it's gone a little bit more conservative than it was last year. For those of you who have followed our research over the years, you might remember last year we had a really big data set focusing on AI adoption. And we actually found that this year there is a decrease of 3% still for the group of people that are quite conservative towards AI adoption. So with this in mind, this overall theme of looking inwards and investing in people and secondly technology. Maybe another question for you, Marco, considering the risks and the economic climate that we just spoke about, what is your take on this tactic of looking inwards for growth rather than outwards?
I think it totally makes sense for various reasons. Like, I would say that first of all, it builds stronger resilience. There is a lot more focus on people. And now it's crucial for various reasons, but to upskill them, in these new eras on AI and other things, but also in terms of efficiency and productivity. Now I think it's even more important than before, and I know that this inward look might mean maybe also missing some market opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
So there is less focus on expansion and so on, and maybe there are competitors that are more aggressive. But I guess you can't just really look at everything. So I totally understand and agree that now with all of the changes that we're seeing, it's very important that you build the right setup for agility, for productivity, so that you can actually go faster for longer in the future instead of just going everywhere.
Yeah. I see everybody nodding. Is this what you see with the businesses you work with as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think leading on from the previous comments as well, one of the biggest things in business is to control the controllables, right? It's not to try and worry about whether Trump's going to get in or whether there's a Labour government or a Conservative government in the UK and those kind of things, because they're beyond your control and you can't predict what they're going to do and the real impact on your business. So that you can mitigate those and you can try and anticipate those, but you can't get everything right. And if you're trying to do that, you'll spend all day crystal ball gazing and doing any work. So I think the fact that we're starting to see from the survey results that businesses are saying, right, okay, well we can see that productivity and efficiency in lots of economies is a problem. The way to address that is to upskill people. That also then starts to address the challenge that AI is bringing to businesses in terms of taking away jobs and automation. And so that's understandable, because then that means that from a business point of view, you can be more agile, like Marco said, but you can also then start to address some of those more existential risks in the marketplace, and you can maybe put prices up or maybe be able to squeeze prices and keep efficiency flowing and profitability flowing. So I think that's part of what we're seeing is this kind of inward facing thing, where I think probably, if it's fair to say, over the last maybe like 10 years or so, businesses have been shedding cost and not investing, and now they're suddenly realizing that this has to happen, because shedding cost doesn't make you any better as a business. It's just a short-term measure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, let's stick with these three themes, because we've got a whole lot of data that actually supports some of the things that you also just mentioned. So this year we looked at three, we call them the profitability levers, being operations, people, and innovation. And we asked business leaders to kind of self-assess across these. And what we found here is that operating models are by far the area where business leaders identify the greatest need for improvement and further development this year, with 76% actually saying it needs improvement, with another 4% saying it's completely ineffective. So yeah, clearly what we just heard from our panel as well, a strong focus on that. When it comes to workforce and people models, we found that only 37% actually thought of their workforce as being high performing and engaged. And when it comes to innovation, 2/3 actually haven't found the formula to innovate properly yet. And more than half say that the success of their innovation programs has been variable. So I think with that, maybe I can direct the next question to you, Tracy. What are your thoughts on the relationship between these three pillars, if you will, operations, workforce, and innovation, considering how tough self-critics business leaders have been in our survey this year?
Yeah, I mean, it's a massive question, isn't it? Because each of these are really important themes in their own right, and then it's the interplay between them. So one of the things I've been really struck by in terms of my organisation, which is based in the City of London and also an office in the Middle East and a lot of our IT operations out in Sri Lanka, is that local cultures also kind of trump what you're doing in the business model. And if you don't spend a lot of time really engaging early on, and for me, innovation has to come from within as well. You can't just impose it, because it never really works, and you can spend lots of time on a culture program or on a kind of more training, but actually it never really lands. So I think the really smart companies are almost doing the kind of cliche word sandbox, but amongst their own people. So instead of surveying people about what kind of culture they think they've got, actually looking at ways to enhance the kind of theme of leading change, being the future you want to be, all of those kind of things. And what we've seen is very, very different levels of willingness to go the extra mile in work. So cultures where the workforce is still hungry, younger talent is really saying, give me that internship, I want to come into the office. It's quite different in different, some people will come in only on their own terms, only if it's me. I don't think we've quite unpacked yet what hybrid means. And I think everybody has their own interpretation. So I'd also say that innovation is innovation in terms of people's ways of working, not just the technology. And I wouldn't put money on it, but I'm sensing that we might be moving away from just being about pure tech solutions into how people are using that technology, and whether or not there's almost, sounds awful, and I'm not a history student, but are we getting also the machines can't do it? It's the Luddite mentality, is it slightly creeping in? And what do we do about that? And how, as an innovative organisation, do you embrace change in the ways that are really going to make the benefit? Because I completely agree with John, if you don't, you could be just constantly doing different. And constantly doing different can be quite costly and almost set you backwards instead of forwards. And my final point before I pass to the other panellists is that just look at what we heard. It was ChatGPT, and then the Chinese come in with, DeepSeek overnight. It's 10 times cheap, it's just extraordinary. So the pace of change is well beyond my tiny brain. It's really, really now almost people are out bidding each other on how fast, how much cheaper is it. So what are you going to invest in? What is the absolutely one thing you've got to do to be a really innovative organisation? And again, I think that's a good time to be debating that now, and your report stimulated that for me. There's no one answer, is there? There's no easy, it's all about reducing this or doing that. None of it. It's much more interesting times we live in.
Yeah. Oh, and I know you have an opinion on that.
I have an opinion on that because I work with corporate innovators. That's actually my vantage point. And the thing is, when you look inwards, you also identify all of these inefficiencies. So why is it that companies cannot find their focus point? Why are they lost when something changes in the system? This happens because they're quite traditional. So even if my company is doing sales or doing software or something else, it has rigid structures, and we need to figure out ways to modify those rigid structures. Often in our internal lingo, we talk about knowledge flows. So that's the currency of innovation. How efficiently can that knowledge transition from one side to the next, from inside outwards, from outwards to our own organization in a coupled mode? We're trying to build all sorts of consortia and ecosystems. But for that, you need a good architecture. So for that, you need to invest a little bit. And it might not be the same investment each year. Mm-hmm. One year I might focus on systems. On the other year I might upskill my personnel. So we have all sorts of smaller issues that we need to deal with in this journey that we are on. And I just wanted to give you an example because I stumbled upon this recently. There is a German company, Boehringer Ingelheim. They are a pharmaceutical organization, perhaps you know them. They have focused their entire attention on open science. Mm-hmm. I mean, you would think, well, maybe they should actually protect their R&D, do the opposite. No, they're opening up. So they have a platform where you as a research organization can select molecules. They will be delivered to you free of charge. You may test them and find alternative use cases. So this is a way to expand your R&D organization. Then in parallel, they have a recruiting platform for their postdocs. We were talking about that in the break. So you want recruitment alongside your R&D organization. And then thirdly, they have ways to form consortia efficiently. So to really distribute that funding. There's a lot coming from the European Union, from other entities. These are different strategies, different tactics, and they might be a little bit different than what has worked in the past. So I'm really energized when I see these kinds of use cases.
Yeah, that's a lovely example. I'm going to come back to that example of innovation. But let's dive a little bit deeper into the operational efficiency and the kind of actions that business leaders say they're taking this year in order to improve their operating models. So what we found is that they're targeting like foundational improvements. So the top 3 actions that they're taking, for example, are modernizing their tech systems, they are improving organizational structures, and they are standardizing or streamlining processes. We then asked, in what of these areas are you using AI to help you do that? And here we found that it's actually AI to enable a broader sense of transformation. So the top areas that they're deploying AI on for their operating models are in, not surprisingly, enhancing data analytic capabilities, upgrading technology, and improving just overall business agility. So, Oana, if I may come back to you, like we saw on the previous slide, 4 in 5 business leaders recognize the need to improve their operating model. What do you think it is about traditional operating models that is failing them right now?
Well, I think there's this disconnect when you think about operating models and also efficiency topics. People don't realize that you can actually innovate in those spheres. So it's a little bit smaller. It's not as exciting as launching a disruptive product or service. But that is actually where the gains are.
Yeah.
Most of the portfolios, we often do analyses of innovation portfolios, and we see that maybe 5% of that is disruptive. So most of your projects will be focused on improving those operational efficiencies. And I mean, in order to enhance that and to make that better, you need to give people permission to work in those areas. So give them permission to share those ideas, to suggest changes. I've seen lots of very nice examples of terminals being placed on the ground floor of manufacturing facilities, for example, or in spaces where people move around a lot. So making it easy to share that input can actually lead to quite dramatic change. And you don't need to have a special profile for that. You just need to be careful to pick up signals. If something goes wrong, announce that immediately. So there's this whole issue of forming these tiny habits that will help improve the existing models. So often the rigidities come from because what we've done in the past has probably worked up to a point. We think it's difficult, right, to change. But with tiny interventions, you can actually nudge the crowd. And what that also does is, and we're coming back to another point, to empowerment. So it gives people the permission to engineer a little bit of serendipity into their day job. They feel important. Employee attrition usually will be lower. So you have a lot of gains in the long run.
Absolutely. It's a really nice bridge to my next data point, actually, which is around people and what leaders are doing to empower their people and their workforce. So again, what we're seeing here is that training and development is topping the agenda with 55%. What we're seeing here as well, earlier we asked the question about actions that they're taking in general, which is a question that we ask year on year. And we found that the investment in talent has actually gone up by 10 percentage points compared to last year. So think about the fact that we focused on AI last year. We're almost seeing that realization that we have to invest in people to really get the most return out of all of that technology. Other areas that they're investing in, like Oana mentioned, improving culture, and work environment and wellness areas that we also see are high on the agenda this year. Unsurprisingly, where do they use AI? Things like workflow management and staffing models, which I think makes sense because that's where the data will be. Tracy, I know that you're very passionate about the whole people piece. If I may ask, what strategies do you think are most effective for building a workforce that can really drive innovation in a company?
So I think giving people very much a sort of license to operate. I think a philosophy that you don't hear talked about so much is fail fast. So if you don't try, you're always going to be behind the people who are the real innovators. But actually, if you have a culture where people can get their ideas supported, we have tried a lot about having innovation champions. And actually, if you say 3 or 4 days a week, we really do want people to come together and do different things. You find different project teams sort of emerge, so you don't have to have so much sort of structure around things. It's a kind of natural way, and before you know it, simple things start to happen just like that, and even the more complicated things can slightly kind of get the pace of change quicker. I'm from an education charity, that's what we do. People take exams of ours. The biggest launch we've ever had is in a certificate in ethical AI. And the thing we learned from that is nobody, not even the biggest investment banks, are just going to keep investing in people to study for ages on formal examinations. They want people to learn real time. They want people to learn in ways that are much more bite-sized. I've even heard the term nano module recently as the way forward in terms of learning, which completely blew my mind, I'm afraid, because like, how can you learn that quickly? But these are the things that I don't think we're talking about enough. And actually, for people who have come out of universities post-COVID, where you're not in an exam hall in a lecture theatre like in my day, you've done stuff, continuous learning, upskilling, real time, all of those kind of things. So for me, that is the next big topical conversation, and stuff that we are really trying to do is a body that, you know, I give out Ofqual regulated qualifications, and I can see that our CPD now is doing way better than the classic examinations and stuff. So that tells me that's really starting to bite. The other small point I'd make is you've got to utilise different talent pools. I think we've often all been a bit smug about kind of what did you have a degree in and what did you do, whereas actually I think that is really less and less relevant. And a lot of the sort of companies I talk to, it's all about taking people at completely different levels and having completely different career paths, and that breeds actually quite a lot of internal competition, and people come in with a lot more to prove and tend to advance far quicker than the people who might have the best classic qualifications. So I think that's another quite interesting and chimes very much what you're saying about, you know, you've got to have the sort of ability to say, come on, tell us. And the very final point is, and what are we rewarding? We are looking at much different pay and reward structures now. Some people say it's not about a pay rise, it's about the ability to have a week of working anywhere. Where are we saying, given so much more is online, do you need people based in one place? Do you need a big office anymore? Don't you need the facilities and the tech that works and all of that? So I think it's a great opportunity for thinking about how do you operate and the efficiencies, and actually in a way that's good for the people in the organisation and good for the organisation in terms of cost.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that all of that echoes my next point. Actually, I feel you kind of already made the point for me. But yeah, definitely what we see is that leaders are prioritizing culture and people when it comes to improving their innovation, and the actions that they're taking in that regard are very people-centric. So first and foremost, encouraging a culture of innovation is at the top of the list, but also very much cross-functional collaboration, like you just mentioned. Interestingly, traditional innovation infrastructures are scoring a lot less high. So things like investing in an innovation lab, only 15% is doing that. Yeah. And similarly, only 12% is investing in an advisory board, which I thought was quite interesting. However, they're using AI to do that. Yeah. So 67% is saying that they're using AI to develop their innovation labs. And I guess unsurprisingly, they're also using AI for analytics and trend analysis and prototyping. But to come back to the culture piece, and Oana, I think this is one that I'd like to ask you again. What are the best practices when it comes to creating a culture of innovation?
Yeah. So we already covered some of those points. So you create a culture of innovation by probably making people comfortable first with what is innovation. Maybe you stop calling it innovation, maybe you find another term. That is a very real issue because people become a little bit...
what would an alternative term be?
we could call it continuous improvement, for instance, and then that makes people a little bit feel more at ease. They don't need to come up with something new to the world. That's often a misconception that we need to do that in order to progress. That's not the case. Often, creating a culture for innovation is actually a matter of juggling all sorts of paradoxes. So on the one hand, we mentioned this, and I'm very glad we did. We talk about fear of failure and fail forward and fail fast. Yes, but failing fast does not mean that we have a tolerance for incompetence. So we want to document as rigorously our flaws as we want to document our successes. How about we publish use cases that talk about what has worked alongside publishing use cases with what has not worked? That's the core of this open science movement as well. So I want to co-publish because I want to understand what other labs are achieving or are failing to achieve. That level of transparency really helps all of us move forward as opposed to just some of us, right? And there are, of course, other aspects too. So you want to make sure that this attitude towards external knowledge, that's my specialty, of course. That's why I come back to that a lot. We have a term for it. It's called the not invented here syndrome. I will not trust knowledge that is coming from an organization that is my rival organization, right? Like with you. So you would look at a survey that is done by a rival company. I would say, no, I don't trust their methodology, their data. But maybe you should, because maybe it's very similar to yours. Maybe there's something to learn from there. That kind of spirit is what really helps innovation and helps really create that culture. If knowledge can move fast, we can take decisions faster. We can see where we are. We can be introspective. We can do also maturity studies, but that requires a level of humbleness. So and that's the paradox. On the one hand, you want to, of course, appear very confident. I am taking all the right decisions. I am, creating lots of new products and services each month. On the other hand, I need to take a step back and figure out, in the grand scheme of things, is this really important?
Yeah.
So, am I making the right investment? So, those kinds of paradoxes. I think that finding that balance is really what creates that culture for innovation. So allowing yourself to learn continuously, but learn in a smart way.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you.
I think just to add to that as well, I do a lot of work with businesses around like systems and processes and introducing new technologies and new ways of working. And what I find, I'm going to be a little bit flippant here, but what I find about when you go into these organizations is, they might not think that they're innovating, but they've got a lot of people who are incredibly lazy and finding shortcuts everywhere. And isn't that innovation, right, in terms of process? And we see that all the time. We go into organizations where there aren't things like SOP, standard operating procedures. And so what happens is a new person comes into the organization, they learn all of the bad policies and procedures and the techniques of the person that teaches them, and then they refine those because they don't like using that piece of technology there, or they don't like to use that paperclip that they've got to use, or whatever it is. And so, for me, what you've got to do is you've got to embrace like our humanness in innovation when it comes to the fact that we are lazy by default. We don't like change. We like things that are similar and as straightforward as possible. And that it's psychological, it's chemical, it's biology and everything else. And there's a whole bunch of books you can read around, why human beings are lazy, because it takes the load off our brain, so we can, get through the day without thinking too hard and stuff. But I think that's a really important thing. Is like we talk about innovation like this big sexy thing about inventing the next, rocket or electric car or whatever it is. And actually, it can be really, really mundane, simple things. And innovation in an organization that maybe is operating in say Southern Africa might be completely different to what innovation in North America might look like, for example. And I think we've got to really understand the context of that and not get too swept away by we've got to do something exciting and sexy every day.
Excellent, thank you. Speaking of taking the load of our lazy brain, let's talk about AI for a second. So, as I mentioned before, we assessed the attitude that business leaders are having towards AI once again this year. And we actually find a bit of a paradox, because when asked the question, what is the most important technology for the coming 5 years, AI is by far the top technology by nearly 70% of respondents. Yet, when we looked at business leaders, their sentiment towards AI, we actually saw that the conservative group, if you will, is growing slightly. So what we're looking at here is 4 different segments based on attitude towards AI. The AI explorers who are willing to try, but for whom it's not yet a priority. So this group is really saying that they need a proven business case or a clear ROI when they're willing to use AI. There's the conservatives that are a bit more risk averse and not really using AI yet. And then there are the innovators who obviously have been the adopters and are saying that they're using AI more widely. So what are they using AI for then? When we look at the data this year compared to last year, we actually find that business leaders are much more focused in what they're using AI for. Last year we saw that they were kind of trialing it across a range of different things, whereas this year we can really tell that things like content generation, marketing and BD, like those are the areas that have the proven business case, and this is where we see the largest adoption in AI. Process automation, the largest uptake with 10% increase from last year, for example. So looking at AI, John, I know this is your sweet spot, your area of expertise. Can you maybe share a couple of examples of how businesses can efficiently deploy AI?
That's the $1 million question, right? But yeah, I mean, I guess just reflecting on the results that we see here, I think that summary of the fact that what we experienced, particularly I guess with like ChatGPT, is everyone launched into it and tried to find a solution to a problem that didn't exist, and that's then the reason why everyone then pulled back, because they were like, well, yeah, it makes my LinkedIn post a bit more interesting or whatever, but it's not all that great. It's not changing too much, and what we did see with the innovators, which is really interesting, is those specific use cases. They went for a problem and then they tried to address that problem, and if they couldn't fix that problem, moved on and found another problem, and then moved on, which is like the classic case of innovation, right? And so that's what we've kind of seen. In terms of what we're seeing, in terms of businesses and their use of AI, you mentioned one in terms of marketing. That's a massive one. We're seeing a huge amount of use in coding in areas of software engineering development, particularly around businesses that maybe would have previously gone out and bought that expertise in. They're now just literally going to ChatGPT and saying, how do I write this Python code to do this analysis, for example? And even my team are doing that, and they're experts in their field, and that's just what we're going to see more and more of. I think the other thing that we started to see elements of, and it's going to be huge this year, is agentic AI, this concept of teaching bots to learn a process and then replicate that process over and over. This isn't RPA, which we've been used to before and has been around for quite a long time. This is quite literally about taking a product, teaching it where to click the buttons in QuickBooks or Xero or SAP or whatever it is that you might use, and do something repetitive over and over. And I've already been talking to some technology businesses about how do you do things like accounts payable processing and do all of the accruals and prepayments off the back end of that, so your management accounts at the end of the month are done without you ever lifting a finger. That we're going to see huge amounts of, and we've seen some elements of that literally in the last few weeks. It got a little bit buried by the DeepSeek stuff, but we're going to see more and more of that. And for me, I kind of wind back and forward with this, but 2 years ago I was talking about how AI was going to replace lots of jobs. Last year I kind of eased back a little bit and I was like, no, it's okay, everyone, we're fine. This year we're screwed again, and I do genuinely think that there's going to be a real challenge to a lot of fairly process-driven jobs where there was a presentation I went to at an event a while ago which talked about taking the robots out of the humans, and I think we do use our human capital in a lot of organizations to do very repetitive tasks which will almost inevitably get replaced by AI. Now, I'm not saying it's going to happen tomorrow. We talked about cloud accounting 15 years ago, getting rid of loads of people, and that never happened because the adoption curves are quite slow. But I think we'll see that. I think the difference here is that, particularly with agentic AI, is that you can literally build something in a day to fix a problem that you've got in your organization. You don't need any real skill other than to understand the process, and you can already go out and ask ChatGPT how to build it, what the right technologies are, and everything else. And so this is kind of going to push this technology out to anybody to deliver. And so we're not going to have to rely on vendors delivering to the market, which we've previously had to do with lots of technological innovation.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting your comment about taking the robot out of the humans, because actually the type of AI deployment that we're seeing in our data is very much about augmenting human capabilities and supporting the workforce, whereas maybe that message you were talking about earlier about the AI replacing jobs, etc., has been a bit of a maybe demotivating narrative for people.
I think, just to pick up on that point, I think the interesting thing about using AI to augment human capital in an organisation has been the easy route, because it's the safest route as well. It's the route that says, don't worry, we're not going to sack you because we can get rid of you. We're going to help you learn this technology, and then you can keep implementing it. And there are certainly opportunities and elements of using AI in its broadest sense is a really broad church, and there's lots of things where you still need humans to check things, to verify data, to verify responses and things. But I do think there are also elements of other parts of this where we're going to start exploring over the next few months that really do have an existential threat that will affect employment in lots of industries.
I just wanted to add that a lot of tech companies, but also the US government now, is just enforcing or want to enforce full office policy, right, in-person policy. And I just can't help think that it's because in the case that people don't come back, then they offer a generous payout so that they can actually be more efficient and use AI and, problem solved. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I wish I worked in the federal government at the moment, because I think it's 8 months of pay settlement to get out of a job. I'm not a big fan of this back to the office push that we're seeing, across the globe. There are rights and wrongs about that, but I do genuinely think, Tracy mentioned we kind of haven't figured out this hybrid working space at the moment. If you're going to, if you're going to do what the US government's going to do and get rid of 10% of employees, well, something's got to give there, right? Because those people are doing something, so you've got to replace the jobs and the fundamental processes that they're doing and delivering. That's going to be replaced by something, and if it's not going to be replaced by people, it's going to be replaced by technology.
Same JP Morgan, for example, or other big organizations, but.
Yeah. That's depressing.
I think I'm going to come in. I'm more of an optimist. So I think that what we haven't talked about enough is with the new generative AI, where is it going to be used to actually help us all? So I sit on something for the Minister of Justice here called the Regulatory Response Unit, and it's about the concepts of work in law tech. So in many countries, very true in the UK, people don't get advice and help when they need it, and it leads to a bigger problem and can make all sorts of things not work in their lives. So where technology can actually grow the economy, because actually it's providing more people with a service that helps in the whole professional services ecosystem, I think we've seen nothing yet as to where things might change in a more positive manner. So if you're using AI to genuinely make a bigger opportunity for more people, then I think that's very investable and very interesting. And the other aspect to it all is there's always a fear factor with change, regardless of whether it's digital and technology driven or not. People, and again, we have Mr. Trump to thank, wokeism has gone, loads of things that have got to be stopped because they're inherently bad. Well, no, nothing is inherently bad. It's how it is dealt with and how we debate it and what matters to which groups of people. And so segmentation of the workforce, I agree, may come to the fore more, and you may need more of these kind of people and less of those kind of people, but you can make it all work. So I kind of think we don't know yet. But I think there are more grounds to say that other jobs will come to the fore, and it won't all be complete wipeout of jobs, but it will mean that you have got to upskill. And as you know, I'm old now. My young daughters who are just in their first jobs post-uni, the things they say about what they expect from work and where I think the nation will be going when people are living to 100 and we're going to have multi-generational families. And if 2 generations are working, who's looking after granny? Well, that might be the robot, might it? I mean, I don't know. But I simply think there's a lot more to think about. And I don't think it's a one-size-fits-all by any means. And I think the production of different things and the costs, and do we want more people to be utilising their brains a lot more as opposed to just doing process? Yes, we do. And how will that then impact? And what will it do about the kind of approach we have to schooling, and what basics do you now need for a workforce, and all of that? Massively big questions, very interesting questions, not easy answers.
I will just pick up on Tracy's point, because I'll be positive about this as well. But I think, you know, if you look at every technological revolution that we've had, you know, throughout the history of mankind, you know, what you've seen in terms of the jobs that have been removed from the economy are the mundane jobs, the ones that don't give you any, you know, particular satisfaction. They don't pay particularly well. You know, they're not really the type of jobs, you know, that anyone's really interested in. And if you think about, you know, well, I think we're all old on the panel, aren't we, pretty much? But like, sorry, Oana. But if you kind of look at the challenges that we see with younger people coming into employment, is that, you know, what are they looking for? They're looking for fulfillment. They're not looking to sit at a desk and just tap away at a computer all day, or just, you know, flip burgers or whatever it is. And so, you know, that's the great opportunity for us to embrace these kind of technologies. You know, I think there are, you know, I still do have concerns around sort of, you know, knowledge-based economy services that I particularly work in, because I do think that could potentially be replaced. So we've got to then adapt to how do we interact with our clients and other people in our business and things, and do the things that robots still can't do and probably won't be able to do for a long time. But you do make a really interesting point, Tracy, about the training, and that's something that we talk about in the accounting sector, is like, you know, should we still be teaching people the basics of how to do debits and credits, for example, you know, when actually what we should be teaching them is how to articulate and have a conversation with someone and interact with them and perceive how they're feeling when they're telling you things across the desk, and react and be able to adapt to those things.
Brilliant, thank you.
Maybe just a final point on that, because you touched a sensitive chord there. No, and the thing is, you really don't want those mundane, boring, repetitive tasks, right? You want to do better things, and there are so many examples of, okay, AI comes in, they might take away some jobs, but then they free us up to think about other things. There was a very nice project here in the UK, I'm not sure if it's still active, there was a project about data poverty. I think it was led by O2 Labs.
Yes, it was.
Right, so it's fantastic that you're familiar with it, because I was part of the Matchbox training session where employees of Liberty Global, who's the holding company, or who was the holding company for O2 Virgin Media, was teaching a cohort of 25 professionals about innovation, and in the context was exactly that. So let's think about what could be immensely beneficial for our society. Let's drop a little bit the operational efficiency hat. Let's think about what could we improve for people that don't have enough. And there are countless variations of this. You have fuel poverty as well, for instance, Baxi boilers and Coventry University, right? This is what we should be doing, right? I mean, when I started my job, so some of my first jobs were translator. That's gone. So now you have, that's automated. I used to write blog posts and do all sorts of webcasts and media. Now a blog post is written in under 1 minute by ChatGPT. So everything is gone. So of course you have to think about what else could you do with your intellect, how can you engineer serendipity into other areas. It's scary, of course. I would not be able to make pocket money now with my basic skills. I have to think about something else. But that's how we move on, right? You don't want to be stuck in those jobs.
Such an interesting topic. I'm really sorry, but we have to move on for the interest of time. But let's continue talking after. Right. moving on to the final part of our section today, we segmented our data based on performance, and we got some really interesting findings there. So we used year-on-year profit margin increases or decreases to identify 3 different groups within our data set, and we call them the profit defenders, the profit stabilizers, and the profit accelerators. And through this lens, we looked at the differences between these groups and what kind of actions, especially the profit accelerators, are taking this year in comparison to the other 2 groups. So looking at the actions they are taking in the next 12 months, the interesting differences that we're seeing here is around investment. So areas like operational efficiency, new technology, those are kind of similar across the 3 cohorts. But then actually when it comes to investing in other areas, we see that the profit accelerators are much more steady and consistent in how they invest, whereas the other groups are a little bit more, like peaks and valleys, as you see on the chart here. Just in the interest of time, moving to the next data point, we looked at the differences when it comes to managing their operating models as well. So here what we see is, again, the similarities are around operational structures, technology systems, and process streamlining, where all 3 of the groups are investing this year. But the thing that we found very interesting here that stood out was strengthening risk management. And there's actually a 19 percentage points difference between the profit accelerators who are really focused on this versus the other groups that are not, which kind of hints at that this group is seeing the correlation between strengthening their risk management, possibly especially around technology and security and all of that, with performance and profit. And then the third point is around the differences within their people strategy and their workforce models. So here again, the similarities are around training and development and investing in people and culture, where we see that all 3 groups are focused on this. However, when it comes to more of a long-term vision, we see that the profit accelerators are actually investing more in things like succession planning and leadership development training, those kinds of things. So this would suggest that they are really thinking about the longer term, thinking about future leadership to continue the initiatives that they're doing, and also keeping that knowledge, like retaining that knowledge within the organization. Sorry if I went through that a little bit quick, but I would rather have you guys speak. So Marco, maybe my first question to you, when you think about these 3 different groups and the differences in terms of the actions that they're taking, what is your take on that? Does any of that surprise you?
No, it really doesn't. Maybe one thing, it's not surprises me, but it's I thought that it didn't result so big, the difference in percentage points about risk management.
Yeah.
But I see it clearly, and I think it's also connected to the fact that yes, confidence is back, but because we're more aware of the risks and we have our systems in place. Mm-hmm. So if you think about that, in order to transform, you need to know who you are, you need to have everything in order, you need to have your risk systems in place. And because of that, you can leverage on technology to then become a different organization. So if you think about that, it's logical. Mm-hmm. I would have assumed that it was the case for all companies, but apparently there are differences between these 3 groups. But if in general, I would say that the profit accelerators, and this is unexpected, they think more about the future. Mm-hmm. And it is not so much the fact that they focus on succession planning or maybe combining people with AI or technology that is necessarily is the reason for them to generate the profit. Mm-hmm. I think the reason for them to generate more profits or to just accelerate profits rather than defend or stabilize profits is the mindset. Because that type of mindset is intangible. Yeah. On one side, but it's actually everywhere. So you can actually breathe it in the company, It's what we call probably culture of growth, or to a certain extent, of what did you say instead of innovation? You said something.
Continuous improvement?
Yeah. Okay. That one, or problem solving. I would say problem solving.
That's better.
So the future is in the hands of these companies, and I don't think there is a super bright future for those companies who want to remain traditional, like, forever, and don't want to change. I think that there's going to be hard times regardless of where they operate.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when we were preparing for this panel, John, you put it quite nicely that obviously the profit accelerators have more to invest, right? Mm-hmm. So that's probably why you see that the investment is like more spread out equally. Just touching on AI again, where do you see that maybe those who have less to invest can use AI to level that out? Sorry, I know that one we didn't practice. But
no, that's all right. It's okay. I can deal off the cuff. Yeah, I mean, I think this kind of what we're displaying here is a bit of a it's a bit of a chicken and egg thing, right? In terms of if you are a successful business, then you do have the ability to invest and spend more, and that probably means you've got more time to spend thinking about the longer term future. And in terms of the risk management things, I always like to bring that back to the fact that you think about your reputation as a business. It takes months, years, decades to build up, but it can take seconds to destroy. And it's that kind of thinking that I think you see successful businesses are always thinking about, and then that lends itself to how do I protect all the other things in my business, the people, the culture, etc. But talking about AI and like what you can do there is like, look, AI is a low cost investment nowadays. You can go to ChatGPT, and as long as you're not sharing confidential information, you can get it for free, right? You can do so many other things. You can use it for research, for improvement, and we're talking about how do we upskill people, how do we provide them with better education, wider skill bases. You can do all of that now through all of these free tools and stuff, and it's really just a matter of choosing one or choosing a multitude of them and layering them over the top of each other. Maybe we'll all be DeepSeek users by next week. Who knows? But the reality is that there's so much there at our fingertips that you can get hold of, and all you need is the time and the opportunity to do it. So that's the cost to a business. The cost is taking someone away from the day job and giving them an hour to explore this and then see where that takes them and allow them just the freedom to do that.
Thank you. Yes. We're nearing the conclusion of our panel. Tracy, do you have any concluding thoughts or takeaways from the report for the business leaders listening to this discussion?
I think for me it was whatever you're doing, you've got to find the thinking time, and you've got to be customer centric. And customer behaviours and demands and aspirations are changing all the time. So whatever you do, keep checking in with the people you're there to engage with, because if you don't, you can lose it really fast.
Thank you. Oana?
For me, it would be design systems not for a rigid status quo, but design systems for a changing world. So try being adaptable, and we've seen lots of examples in the report. What could you possibly invest in? Just what you mentioned right now prompted me to think, well, what could be a good pathway? Well, I could get people to do very short training sessions, or I could get them to form a very quick habit, or that doesn't cost a lot. Mm-hmm. I could have them go away and come back with a very short with a very quick new solution. I don't have to invest millions in training. Mm-hmm. I can do this incrementally. So for me, it would be design systems, whether they are AI enhanced or not, that are designed for a changing world, not for what I've done in the past 20 years.
Yeah, excellent. John, any concluding thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, just on that that point about new strategies and new opportunities and things, is that the world is a changing place. We've known that forever. Nothing's new this year versus last year, other than the technology base that we're really in and the thinking that we have around it. So for me, the way that you form new habits, it takes a human being at least 6 weeks to start forming a new habit. So if you want to start learning how to use ChatGPT, start today and diligently marking a diary 6 weeks from now that you've spent an hour at lunchtime every day doing it or something like that. I think for me, the most important thing is we should be making the places that we work fun to be at. They should be engaging. They should be places where we get supported and we get encouraged to do things, and we get given the time to do the other things that we would like to do, but we don't necessarily get the time to do because we're locked into a rigid set of processes and routines that sometimes we're not allowed to deviate from. And the irony is, like I said before, we do deviate from them because we're lazy human beings. It's just that we don't tell the people around us, and then that's where we stop innovating, because we don't communicate. And ultimately, everything that we do in an organization comes down to communication.
Yeah, so I think all of the things that we said, but all of them actually are a byproduct of creating an innovative mindset. Now, it's easy to say, how do you do that? That's a big challenge, and I think everything starts from the top. When I say from the top, I speak about the boards. The boards are peculiar type of groups, and they might get complacent if the results are good. They might overreact if the results are not great, and they tend to discuss with each other, because they've been there for a long time and they kind of friends and so on. So, and recently I saw that now it's been the highest percentage of CEOs that have been actually fired by boards. Now, that is not an invitation to do so, in my respect, but you wanna start the conversation early. You wanna create that type of environment where you challenge each other and see if you're doing the right things, instead of having to just wait for the results to be a disaster and then there is no way back. And then everything is too late. Then that's the only thing I would say.
Excellent, thank you so much. I think with that, this concludes our panel discussion. Our report is now available on our website, hlb.global/survey of business leaders. The QR code, if you want. I'm seeing some phones. We have a couple of tools as well to explore our data with and to play around with some filters and test your own AI maturity as well. That leaves me to thank all of the business leaders that took the time to complete our survey. Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. And thank you for everybody who has been joining us online. Thank you to our panel. And I hope you really enjoyed the report.
Thank you.
Thanks all.